Today the geology they tell us the earth, the radius of the earth on which we live is about 3,750 miles. And the deeper layers, they are hot and fluid. They cannot sustain life. The more you go on the top, it becomes harder. And the superficial crust on which we live is a solid shell and is very thin, hardly 1 to 30 miles in thickness. And there are high chances that this superficial crust on which we live, it will shake. Today the geology they tell us it is due to the folding phenomena which gives rise to mountain ranges which prevents the earth from shaking. What the geologists discovered recently, the Quran mentioned 1400 years ago. In Surah Naba, chapter number 78, verse number 6 to 7, the Quran says, "We have made the earth as an expanse, wal jibala autada, and the mountains as stakes." The Arabic word used is autad, meaning tent pegs, meaning stakes. And when we see a tent peg, it's hammered into the ground. Only a small portion is above the ground. The major portion is deep underground. So the Quran says the mountains are like tent pegs. And today science tells us that the mountain has got roots which go deep underground. What we see on top of the ground is only a small portion. It's like a tip of an iceberg. When we see the iceberg floating, the portion above the water is hardly 10%. 90% is below water. Similarly, the mountain that we see on top of the earth is a small portion. The major portion is deep underground. The Quran mentions in Surah Yashia, chapter 88, verse number 19, as well as Surah Naziyat, chapter number 79, verse number 32, that we have placed on the earth mountains standing firm. And today, if we analyze, in most of the universities, in the subject of geology, the main guidebook for subject of geology is a book by the name The Earth. It has various authors. One of the authors' name is Dr. Frank Press, who was previously the president of the Academy of Sciences of USA and was also the science advisor to the ex-president of USA, Jimmy Carter. He mentioned in this book about the function of the mountains, and he draws the mountain and shows that the mountains have got deep roots. They are wedge-shaped and go deep underground, just like a tent peg. And Dr. Frank Press says that the function of the mountain is to prevent the earth from shaking. And this is exactly what is mentioned in the Quran 1400 years ago. In Surah Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 31. In Surah Nahl, chapter number 16, verse number 15. That we have placed on the earth mountains standing firm, lest it would shake with you. So the Quran specifies the function of the mountain to prevent the earth from shaking, which Dr. Frank Press has mentioned a few decades earlier. Imagine what the scientists have discovered recently, Quran had mentioned 14 years ago. In the field of oceanology, Quran says in Surah Furqan, chapter number 25, verse 53, that it is He who has let free two bodies of flowing water, one sweet and palatable, the other salty and bitter. Though they meet, they do not mix. There is a barrier which is forbidden to be trespassed. Quran repeats the message in Surah Rahman, chapter 55, verse number 19 and 20. Marj al-Bahraini al-Taqyan, baynahuma barzakhun la yabghiyan. It is He who has let free two bodies of flowing water. Though they meet, they do not mix. There is a barrier which is forbidden to be trespassed. Previously, the commentator of the Quran, they used to wonder, what does the Quran mean by saying that two waters meet? They knew there were two types of water, one salty and the other sweet. But they couldn't understand what does the Quran mean by saying these two types of water meet, but there is a barrier which is forbidden to be trespassed. After science advance, we have come to know recently that whenever one type of water flows into the other type of water, whenever salt water flows into the sweet water, It loses its constituents and gets homogenized into the water it flows. This transitional homogenizing area, this area today scientists call as transitional homogenizing area. This Quran refers to as barzakh, an unseen barrier. Imagine what the scientists, the oceanologists have discovered recently. The Quran describes 14 years ago and says that sweet and salt water, they meet, but they do not mix. There is an unseen barrier, or barzakh, which is forbidden to be trespassed. And this can be seen with your naked eye, even in South Africa. If you go to the southernmost tip of South Africa in Cape Town, and we go to the Cape Point, or the Cape of Good Hope, you find the two types of waters meet, the salt and the sweet water, and you can see the barrier with your own eyes. They meet, but they do not mix. The similar phenomena can be seen in Egypt, when River Nile flows into the Mediterranean Sea, when the sweet water falls into the salty water. And the best example is the Gulf Stream. It starts from the Gulf of Mexico, passes on the east coast of North America, goes eastward towards the west coast of Europe. It travels for thousands of miles. And if you're traveling in a ship and pick up water from one side and pick up water from the other side, you'll find that one water is sweet, the other is salty. Even the temperatures between these two water differs. Let's discuss the subject of biology. The Quran says in Surah Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 30, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. We have created every living thing from water. Will you not then believe? Imagine in the deserts of Arabia, 1400 years ago, the Quran says every living thing is made from water. Who could have believed in it? It sounds like a fairy tale. In the deserts of Arabia, where there was scarcity of water, the Quran says every living thing is made from water. Today, after science advance, we have come to know that the basic unit of every living creature, it is the cell. And the cell contains cytoplasm, which contains about 80% water. Today, science tells us every living creature contains 50 to 90% water. And no living creature can survive without water. Imagine, Quran mentioned this 14 years ago, that every living thing is made from water. You can ask the atheist, who could have mentioned this in the Quran 14 years ago? And he'll be silent.